welcome to the Record Online Q&A session for the Student Body President candidates. I'm Jeffrey. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves first?
All right, I'll go first. Hi, my name is Lucas. I'm a new upper mid. I'm from Montreal, Canada, and I do a variety of things at the school. I play football, I'm on the track team, and I do the record in the print edition.
Hi, I'm Julia. I'm from Rye, New York. This is my third year at Hotchkiss. I was a captain of the girls varsity squash team last year. Also captain for that next year. Girls varsity lacrosse, blue and white board, and I'm also selected to be a TA next year.
So, what made you guys decide to run for president?
I think for me, being at the school for 3 years and kind of seeing how everything's evolved so much really kind of drew me in, and also just being able to collaborate with administrators on so many different types of things, ranging from small things like maybe just study hall to bigger things like schedule changes, stuff like that. And I think that also watching who's done the positions before, I think that they've done a really good job. And obviously, I love Hotchkiss and I want to help it in every way that I can. And so I really want to take some ideas that I've heard from my friends talking about that I've come up with on my own and maybe see those in action.
I think that, for me, I share a lot of the same sentiments as Julia. And I think the thing that is different for me is it's my first year here, but I think that I've had a lot of experience in my past school. Yeah. I've been a student council every year. I've been eligible. So I've always sort of been interested in student government and be able to sort of take a leadership role. And my peers have always sort of look up to me as someone who's who has a voice and has some good ideas. And I think that's sort of no different in Hotchkiss. I think that here, what really drew me in was this idea that I could actually affect change. And yet, I see this year the proposals they're doing for sleepovers, although it's sort of a regression from past years, I still think the change that can be affected this can be pretty monumental. And I think that we both the reason why we ran together is the idea that we are not doing it for any purpose other than being able to sort of help the Hotchkiss community. And we think that we are really enthusiastic about the school, and we sort of want to make it better without sort of going too far. But just sort of taking in some small things that can really make a big difference in the long term.
Yeah. So you mentioned that this is your first year here, and some people don't quite really know what you did before you came to Hotchkiss. So do you want to elaborate on do you want to mention some of the things that you did at your previous school so for the viewers to get to know more about you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm at old school. I was involved in a variety of things. Obviously, sports is a huge focus for me. I was a tri-var athlete at my old school. And coming to Hotchkiss, one of my main focuses was football. But my middle school also did a lot of debating, and that was a really big focus for me. Coming to Hotchkiss, I didn't really have time to do that, but I sort of shifted my focus to the record, which now takes a lot of my time. But I've always been sort of involved in a variety of things. As I said before, I've done student council all the years I was eligible. And it was interesting because we would sort of sit around every Friday morning, all the representatives from each grade, and then the all-school presidents, similar to here, and be able to sort of voice our opinions, bring in ideas from our grade, and sort of have a voice when there were sort of big things. Like example, we changed the uniform a little bit, which is similar to Hotchkiss in the past few years.
Yeah. And
so being able to sort of sit in on that, see the process, and over the years, by my third year, I sort of had a pretty good handle on it and was much more vocal. And I think I grew through that, and I think that those are a lot of skills I can sort of bring into this job because sort of I had a lot of experience and saw what worked, saw what didn't, and saw the skills and how you can sort of talk to people to make what you want to sort of push forward or go through and sort of make everyone understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So there's many pairs that are running. I think there's 6 in total, and some of them have been class presidents before, or are presidents right now. So what do you think that you guys have an advantage compared to them? What sets you apart from the other groups?
I think that, honestly, the fact that we are athletes and have been on teams for a lot of our life, a lot of the skills are super transferable to stepping into a leadership position like this. So on a team, you have your coaches, you have your captains, and then you have the actual team. And each part is super important to make sure that you have a successful team on and off the field. With that being said, I think that Lucas and I have learned through our experiences with sports and also our other interests and activities. I think that we've learned really good teamwork, and we've also learned really important skills such as being able to communicate with our teammates, with our coaches, and doing something not just for the individual but for the good of the entire team. On team sports, it's so important that everyone works as a cohesive unit, and so I think that learning that from sports would be something that we could take into office and really kind of push forward with, having those skills of teamwork and wanting to represent a larger group.
And I think sort of a key thing that you really touched on was the idea of working sort of as a liaison between coaches and players, and sort of being the advocate. Both of us are very close with our coaches, and we would sort of like the same idea between the administration and the student body. So being able to sort of have those relationships with the administration, but also with the students, and being able to sort of be a very fluid liaison between the two, I think is really important. And our experience with sports and being captains definitely helps us and gives us a bit of an advantage in that on that front.
So through your sports experience, you guys know that teamwork is really important. What other values do you think are very important if you are a president for your entire school?
I think one of our very important values, especially for us, would be transparency. And I think Lucas can talk a lot about this, but for us, we wouldn't want to kind of shy away from telling the student body anything that we're working on, anything that maybe the administration might be feeling. And, Dan and Caitlin are doing a super good job this year, especially with all the challenges that they faced in the beginning of the year with the indoor ring. But transparency is definitely a very big value for us.
And I think that like what it comes down to is the idea that like I feel like Dan and Caitlin, despite the really good job they've done this year, a lot of the students don't know a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So I think something that we sort of identified as something that would be really important for our campaign is this idea of sort of being very vocal and very communicative with the students. So like I don't know if there may be a question later about like what are our ideas, but you mind if I get at this now?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that actually.
Right. So we'll just work this in together.
Yeah.
So two sort of big points we want to put forward is like a bi-weekly or maybe monthly email that sort of details what we've been doing. So I think a lot of the things that happens is, let's say, weekly meetings with Mr. Bradley or having meetings with Dr. Gibb. So things like that where the student body never really hears about it, but you're still trying to like working towards something. Like Dan and Caitlin sort of got pushed into this this idea of taking the whole SUFAC Constitution and rewriting it. That's a really long process that like no one really saw the work that was into it.
Yeah.
So I think if we're in that position, I think that being able to say, all right, this week we worked on this section, we added this, we modified this, we met with this person, and we got input from these people. I think that like the student body would like to see that, and I think that that is sort of a value that regardless of what we do, would strengthen the student body as a whole and put a lot more trust into us and whoever's at the head of school, because they will basically know what we're doing. And then the other facet of that is having sort of like an open table discussion. So we would just have like open office hours, let's say during like a double lunch every 2 or 3 weeks, and sort of have a very informal avenue for students to sort of come in, meet with us. Because as we have it right now, we have STUFAC, which I think is a really good thing, but a lot of the times the agenda is very set in stone, and we want to have a resource for kids to be able, especially like lower classmen who are a little more embarrassed to sort of talk in front of a larger group of people, to sort of come talk to us, bounce some ideas off. Because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We think that like the student body has a lot of really good ideas, and 2 heads is not better than 600. So if we get some good ideas and can sort of build on those, and we sort of put other people's ideas along with like the power and like the connections and relationships with other administrators, that we can sort of put those ideas into motion, I think that can really be a huge advantage into sort of being transparency and being sort of really like close to the student body.
Yeah, that's great. You guys sort of brought this up, the interdome policy, that the whole fiasco during this fall, and you sort of talked about how the lack of transparency was one of the big issues that caused that situation. But a lot of students are pretty concerned. Would it be possible to avoid something like this to ever happen again? Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Avoid a situation like the indoor policy, the whole thing during the fall?
I think that with the change of the administration brought a lot of that kind of gray area where it was the administration doing one thing and the students and even I would say the all school presidents kind of thinking one thing. And I think that a lot of it did happen over the summer when those changes were being made, and Dan and Caitlin were put in a very hard position from the start, kind of having to be like, this is what the students are saying, but also being like, well, this is what the administration has done. And I think that they did handle it very well given the circumstances. I think that if Lucas and I were to be in a similar one, we would maybe try to hold an extra STUFAC, an extra meeting, just to, again, with the transparency idea that we don't want to be knowing information that we're not telling the rest of the students. Obviously, confidential information is confidential. However, I believe that if there is information that, wasn't exactly broadcasted to the students, I think that that's something where Lucas and I could step in and be like, hey guys, just a heads up, this is what's happening, and just, give them more of a heads up of what's going on.
I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. So some students have talked about the lack of activities that goes on during the weekends now. Before you were here, we had lots of things going on. Buses to Great Barrington, a lot of things going on in the MAC. I mean, they still happen these days, but a lot less. And do you guys have any plans on improving that part?
I think
we have some ideas. I think that I don't know how you'll know this, but I know that for a fact that right now there's very new people, Mr. Pulse and Mrs. Gibb, who is now leaving, but they are sort of working and they're new, so they're sort of trying to understand what happened last year and what they can bring that's new to Hotchkiss.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually have a very close relationship with Mr. Pulse, and he's really, really receptive to all kinds of feedback. And as it stands right now, there's actually I don't know if I call it a committee that is composed of students. That they actually a student was hey, we should have a committee for this. And I think there's 4 or 5 students that are involved with that, who are actually helping affect change. So I think that it might be too late for this year, and I don't know when this committee was sort of instituted, but a lot of those ideas will sort of be put into place for next year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of talked to Mr. Pulse a lot about that because again, we're pretty close. In terms of some ideas, we don't have any grand plans in terms of sort of transforming the whole landscape.
Yeah.
But we have we really like a lot of the things that happens already, and things we can build on that. So I know Julia's a huge fan of Under the Lights games, and open mic nights where sort of students can go and be able to sort of showcase what they want. Students who come in and out. But another thing that I found is interesting was just getting kids outside and sort of meeting new people and going out. And just playing games. So for me, my ideal Saturday night, let's say, would be playing a huge game of Manhunt or Capture the Flag outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand a few years ago that
Yeah,
happened.
it happened. Yeah.
But I think that that's a type of thing where it's yeah, we live at a boarding school and a lot of stuff we do is really serious and really scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you want to just be a kid again.
Yeah.
Go outside and be able to just sort of let loose.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we're missing.
Mm-hmm.
Is so many things are so regimented, and having an a cappella group is great, but a lot of the times you don't just sit down and listen to something. You want to be doing something. And I think if that's one thing we want to involve is more things that kids are doing, and not something you have to involve your whole night. It's a 5-hour not something that's a 5-hour commitment, but something where you can drop in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and just have a good time. So I think that would be some more things we'd add.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that everything's super fun when we bring in the mentalists, when we bring in magicians, everything like that. But I also think what Lucas was saying, having something a little bit more unstructured where kids can kind of just go unwind, hang out with friends, pop in and out, and kind of go in as they please. I think nights at the farm are really great because they have mid-buses shuttling back and forth, and I think the idea of having a bonfire with s'mores and maybe people bring guitars and sing, I think that is what builds a community, because those are the kind of events where you're not necessarily forced into doing something with people. It's not like a group project. It's not a team. It's you going and simply wanting to connect with the other students in your community.
So recently, last Saturday, we had the Asian American Footstep Conference, which is a really big thing, and diversity plays a big role at Hotchkiss. Do you believe that we have as many conversations about diversity as we should, or do you think we should do more, just for the acknowledgement of such thing?
I mean, I think obviously our community is very diverse, and I think that's a great thing. I do think that there are conversations that are had, but I think that we could make them a little bit more frequent and for the entire student body, because as it stands right now, there's a lot of optional ones that are run through clubs, or maybe a student and faculty are facilitating them.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually do think it would be a really good idea if even once a month we had students representing different groups, similar to the flag idea that they're doing right now in the dining hall on the napkin dispensers. Maybe a student at every all school goes up, talks about their culture, what it means to them, and maybe in the beginning, middle, or end of the school year, we have one big assembly where we kind of talk about diversity and inclusion and topics on that.
And I think just to add on to that, I think what Dr. Myers has done with these community conversations has been a really big step in the right direction. But I think that a lot of the times, even those, despite the fact that it's really well intentioned, I think the idea of having you submit anonymous questions and they're read out and sort of discussed is a really, really good idea. I think we could almost take it one step further and sort of bring it right into the advisory. When you're in really small groups with a teacher you trust, because then kids, especially who are preps and lower mids, who really might not be aware and maybe are from a place where there isn't much diversity, can sort of voice these honest opinions without any malice and say, hey, look, like this is what I don't understand. How can you help me understand that? I think in the all school we had the other day with the speaker, so we almost had an incident where a kid was talking about sort of microaggressions and like how they could respond to that. And I think that like being able to sort of sit down with your advisor and maybe a small group of people or one-on-one and being able to just sort of talk through that and say, hey, like how could I help understand this better would be a really, really good way to go about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that like the bigger group you get it, all of a sudden people start to feel like they're going to get judged.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the biggest point is like avoiding judgment, being able to understand so you can sort of overcome like, your biases.
So this really comes up a lot, and a lot of students complain about it. Saturday classes. So what is your take on that? Because a lot of students think because it's a scheduling, because it's only half day on Wednesday, so I have to make it up on Saturday. But some people think it's really annoying because, you know, Saturday is supposed to be a weekend and you still have to go to classes, and it gets annoying, and a lot of people complain about it. What do you guys think?
My personal view, and I think Lucas is pretty similar, I don't think, honestly, we can go into this thinking we're going to get rid of Saturday classes. I think that that's a very unreasonable request, and I think that is honestly just us kind of shooting too high. I do believe that it's a good thing. I personally like having classes on the days that I have games. I like my schedule, like getting up, going to team breakfast, going to class, and especially as an upperclassman, you're most likely to have 1 or 2 frees on your Saturday anyways, and the classes are usually more relaxed, at least in my experience. With that being said, I think that there could be a little bit more structure exactly to how the Saturday classes are placed, and we say that they're bi-weekly, but if you look at it, it's not exactly like every other week. Even though I think it does in the end add up to being bi-weekly, I think that if we had a true bi-weekly schedule, it would just create a little bit more schedule and structure, so there's none of the students on a Wednesday being like, do we have classes this Saturday, do we not? And I think that would help get rid of some of the confusion and also just help kids prepare mentally for the week ahead and know beforehand.
You know, at the end of our prep year, there's a big change in our school, which is the dress code. But people still talk about it till today, and because some people think, you know, wearing a stricter dress code may look more presentable to people that are visiting, or just, you know, like it'll just look better among the student body. But some people do think it's a lot of work just, you know, dress up every day, and then, you know, they think wearing, you know, like a t-shirt or a sweatshirt may be more comfortable during class. Do you prefer this more like more looser dress code, or do you prefer the stricter one before?
I think that even with the loose dress code now, students will still most of the time make the appropriate decision. I know a lot of my friends never break dress code, or always wearing things that are appropriate in dress code, whether that's a skirt, dress, like jeans, or like a nice shirt. And I think that it's nice also, given the all gender dorm, I think it's nice not to have such a regimented dress code that's girls, boys, and I think that having this freedom also allows for us on maybe days where, you know, you were up until 1 a.m. doing a paper and you want to sleep until 8:15 for class at 8:30. I think it allows students to, you know, get up, maybe get that extra 15 minutes of sleep, throw on jeans and a shirt. I think that it's still presentable, and I think that students often do make the right choice.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with this idea of like expression, because I think that like when you have like boys who are wearing like jacket every day and ties, and girls who are sort of like have to really dress up every day, all of a sudden like your selection becomes very like limited, and you're sort of confined to wearing the same thing every day. And I think that like what's great about Hotchkiss is being able to sort of express yourself, and being in classes, then going to sports. A lot of the times there's very little parts of the day we can actually wear clothes you want to wear, and being able to sort of just mix it up. Some days I'll wear sort of a t-shirt and shorts, other days I'll go wear a blazer and a tie, just sort of depending on the occasion, what I have in my day. And I think sort of the latitude to sort of move along that and like judge that by day is really important for the students, and also helps like independent thinking, because people can just sort of wear what they want to wear and make that own decision, as opposed to saying, oh, okay, here's what blazer am I going to wear today.
At the beginning of last year, there was this huge buzz on the Record newspaper. There's a lot of articles about it, seniority, and a lot of people were, you know, lower classmen were angry about it because they really hated the idea of seniority. But some people defend it as because it's a tradition at Hotchkiss, we should keep it. But some people think some, seniors or upperclassmen over abuse it, and then they become mean to lowerclassmen or whatever. What is your take? What is your view on that? Do you think we should keep this tradition, or do you think this should just be gone?
I think that tradition within reason is very acceptable. I think if it gets to the point where it's hazing or anything like that, I think that's kind of where you draw the line. But I think that something like senior quad or senior tables in the dining hall, the upperclassmen side of the snack bar, I think that's something that's not really harmful to anyone. And it's nice in a community, especially like this, to have something to look forward to as you're getting older, so it's not the same every single year. Like, I know in the summer when I'm coming back to school, I'm like, oh, like last year's big change, getting to sit on both sides of the snack bar, or I love sitting on upper mid benches this year. And so I think it's a really small privilege maybe that you get as an upperclassman, but I think that, again, it's not harmful, it's not hazing, I don't think in any way. And so I think that traditions like that are special and should be kept in our community.
Well, some people think that seniority might produce some strain between lowerclassmen and upperclassmen. Lowerclassmen might be scared to talk to upperclassmen. They're, because they don't know what they're gonna do. And we know this year they started the community dinner among different classes, but people still complain. They think, oh, we have to dress up to go to an awkward dinner, and then we barely talk to each other, and it gets really uncomfortable. Do you guys have any ideas on changing that into something more fun that students might enjoy while bonding, between different classes?
That's a pretty good question. I think that the Olympians and Pythians that was sort of revamped this year is sort of a good way, and I don't know if it's been used sort of to its limit. I haven't really heard that much about it the past few months. But I think using that to sort of talk to people in other classes and sort of using this competition and having let's say we haven't really had this much in all school meeting either, but having some competitions between Olympians and Pythians during all school meeting where sort of students can get to see other people and understand at least know their name, because I think once you know someone's name, you're much more comfortable to sort of go up to them. I think the sports and clubs and all extracurriculars are an extension of that, because when you are able to sort of talk to other kids in other grades through that, that can sort of open up a lot of doors. So I think seniority is one thing, and the community dinner definitely helps that, because I talk to kids I would never have talked to otherwise, and now we'll say hi to in the hall and have a conversation with every now and then. But I think that just having more opportunities that are much more informal for kids to be able to just sort of go and talk to kids in other grades. And I think that also coming from a day school for the past 5 years, I think the boarding aspect helps that a lot too. I think we take that for granted that we'll have a lot of friends in other grades, when in reality out of day school we probably would have never known those kids because you don't live with them. We don't see them at night when you're doing your homework in the library. And I think that's a big part of it as well. And we're pretty lucky to sort of have that.
I mean, building off of the informality part of what Lucas said, I think that even having maybe the prep and the upper mid class presidents having a meeting and being oh, it's supposed to be a nice Sunday, why don't we do a lake party, and there could be spike ball, maybe even treats ice cream or something like that, and just kind of encourage the grades to get out and do something fun but really informal. And I think that would allow the chance for the grades to intermingle.
So Lucas, you mentioned you were a day student before, so you probably never experienced this before, but during our prep year we had this vertical housing sort of thing, and so each grade students live on different floors for different grades. Do you think that's a good idea to bring back to the school?
So when I heard about vertical housing for the first time, I was a bit confused. I was that sounds rockets. How'd that even work? But clearly it's been like that for however many years before. I think that if I had the choice, being an upperclassman, maybe I'd want to bring it back, because I think that I like meeting new kids in the dorm, and there's kids I know kids in my dorm a lot better than I know outside of the dorm. But I think from the view, if I was a parent or if I was a younger lowerclassman student, I'd be a little scared, because I think that having kids who have repeated, having kids who are PGs, living down the I know there's prep floors, but even living down the hall or just upstairs with someone who's 14 years old, is just starting puberty and is his first time living. It's his first time living. No, but seriously, it could be awkward. So, and then showering beside a grown man who has to go full beard could be a little awkward. And I think that having that sort of builds character, but at the same time is not very comfortable. So I think how it works now is good. But I think that like having those interactions sort of outside of the dorm
Yeah.
helps sort of in place of the vertical housing.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to live with those younger kids, at least being able to have other ways to sort of connect with them
Exactly.
would definitely be like a really important part for us.
Exactly. Well, this is all the questions I have. Do you guys have anything that you guys want to add?
I don't think so. I think we've sort of covered it.
Yeah.
Okay. Good luck to you guys, and thank you
Thank
for coming.
Thank
Thank
you. For having
you.
us.